Hi, everybody. It's Marlene with Eerie News. And today is Saturday, May 14th, 2022. Saturday, May 14th, 2022. And no, that's not going to be the first story. Let's get off to this one because, I love true crime murder mysteries. And this has been around for a while. This is an update to cold case, weird thing going on. It's been going on for a long time out in Gilgo Beach. It's out of the New York Post. And it's titled Chilling 911 Calls Released in Shannan Gilbert Case That Led to Serial Killer Probe. In other words, it took them a while to realize they had a serial killer on their hands. But anyway, Suffolk County Police released a trio of 911 calls Friday from the night Shannan Gilbert went missing in the Gilgo Beach area more than a decade ago, providing some insight into her final moments. A troubled and confused Gilbert repeatedly claims to dispatchers early on May 1st, 2010, "Something is going to happen to me," and pleads with two men, "Please get me out of here. I just want to go home." Gilbert, a Craigslist sex worker from Jersey City, New Jersey, was out on Long Island that night meeting a client, Joseph Brewer, at his home in the Oak Beach Association with her driver, Michael Pack, police said. At one point, Gilbert started acting irrationally, and Brewer asked Pack to have her leave, which appears to be when she made the 911 calls. "Please stop it. What are you going to do to me?" she says as a dispatcher repeatedly asks where she is calling from. Okay. "I'm on Long Island," Gilbert says numerous times, but was confused as to why she was in the man's house. "There's somebody after me. I don't know where I am. I am inside a house. I don't know where I am. Can you trace where I am?" Gilbert says on the call. "These people are trying to kill me," she says at one point, to which a man responds playfully, "Shut up," and laughs. She eventually ran from the house and knocked on several doors in the neighborhood, interacting with two neighbors before disappearing, cops said. Both neighbors also called police and could be heard in 911 calls reporting that they saw the troubled woman. One man said she looked like a 14-year-old child, while a woman said she was afraid to let her into her home. As police scoured the nearby area for Gilbert, they discovered the dumping grounds of a serial killer or killers with the remains of 9 others, 7 women, a man, and a toddler. While the details of how Gilbert disappeared were unclear, detectives believe her death was an unfortunate accident and not connected to the Gilgo Beach murders. Investigators believe there may be between 10 and 16 victims of the area's possible serial killer homicides, half of whom apparently worked as prostitutes, cops said. Based on the evidence, the facts, and the totality of the circumstances, the prevailing opinion in Shannan's death, while tragic, was not a murder and was most likely non-criminal, Suffolk County Police Commissioner Rodney Harrison said at a news conference Friday, according to ABC7. Police also said they interviewed Brewer and Pack and determined they were not responsible for Gilbert's death. Harrison, the former chief of department at the NYPD, has renewed focus on hunting down the Long Island serial killer since taking over the Suffolk department, creating a new task force and releasing additional evidence in hopes it will develop new leads. The Gilbert family sued for the release of the calls in 2020, with a judge later only ordering cops to turn over the recordings to the family. Harrison promised to release the tapes after becoming the county's top cop in January. You know what? And one thing, I don't understand why they're having such a hard time identifying any identification, whether it's one serial killer or more than one using that area of Gilgo Beach as a dumping ground. DNA, now they've done incredible things with cases that are 40, 50, 30 years old. And I don't know. I don't know, maybe I'm being naive about this, but when I see where the family has to sue for the release of 911 calls, which normally are like, if all you have to do is ask for them. In other words, they're easily available to the public. They're supposed to be public, accessible to the public. Okay, or if somebody, or if you say you have an attorney and ask for them. You know what? When I see all this thing where they don't release things, where they hold them back, where the family has to sue to get access, especially when it's obvious what they're interested And it is because it has to do with the death, the murder of a loved one. That, oh, that doesn't smell right. Like what? But let's move on. Let's go into something else to worry about. Yeah, a little bit of more paranoia. Just kidding, but let's get on to it. This is out of VentureBeat, and it's titled Prepare for Arrival. Tech Pioneer Warns of Alien Invasion. An alien species is headed for planet Earth, and we have no reason to believe it will be friendly. Some experts predict it will get here within 30 years, while others insist it will arrive far sooner. Nobody knows what it will look like, but it will share two key traits with us humans. It will be intelligent and self-aware. No, this alien will not come from a distant planet. It will be born right here on Earth, hatched in a research lab at a major university or large corporation. I'm referring to the first artificial general intelligence, AGI, that reaches or exceeds human level cognition. As I write these words, billions are being spent to bring this alien to life, as it would be viewed as one of the greatest technological achievements in human history. But unlike our other inventions, this one will have a mind of its own. Literally, and if it behaves like every other intelligent species we know, it will put its own self-interest first, working to maximize its prospects for survival. Should we fear superior intelligence driven by its own goals, values, and self-interests? Many people reject this question, believing we will build AI systems in our own image, ensuring they think, feel, and behave just like we do. This is extremely unlikely to be the case. Artificial minds will not be created by writing software with carefully crafted rules that make them think like us. Instead, engineers feed massive data sets into simple algorithms that automatically adjust their own parameters, making millions upon millions of tiny changes to their structure until an intelligence emerges. An intelligence with inner workings that are far too complex for us to comprehend. And no, feeding it data about humans will not make it think like humans do. This is a common misconception. The false belief that by training an AI on data that describes human behaviors, we will ensure it ends up thinking, feeling, and acting like we do. It will not. Instead, we will build these AI creatures to know humans, not to be human. And yes, they will know us inside and out, able to speak our languages and interpret our gestures, read our facial expressions, and predict our actions. They will understand how we make decisions for good and bad, logical and illogical. After all, we will have spent decades teaching AI systems how we humans behave in almost every situation. But still, their minds will be nothing like ours. To us, they will seem omniscient, linking to remote sensors of all kinds in all places. In the author's 2020 book, Arrival Mind, the AGI is portrayed as having billions of eyes and ears for its perceptual abilities, which could easily span the globe. We humans can't possibly imagine what it would feel like to perceive our world in such an expansive and holistic way, and yet we somehow presume a mind like this will share our morals, values, and sensibilities. It will not. Artificial minds will be profoundly different from any biological brains we know on Earth, from their basic structure and functionality to their overall physiology and psychology. Of course, we will create human-like bodies for these alien minds to inhabit, but they will be little more than robotic facades to make ourselves feel comfortable in their presence. In fact, we humans will work very hard to make these aliens look like us and talk like us, even smile and laugh like us, but deep inside, they will not be anything like us. Most likely, their brains will live in the cloud, fully or partially connected to features and functions both inside and outside the humanoid forms that we personify them as. Still, the facade will work. We will not fear these aliens, not the way we would fear creatures speeding towards us in a mysterious starship. We may even feel a sense of kinship, viewing them as our own creation, a manifestation of our own ingenuity. But if we push those feelings aside, we start to realize that an alien intelligence born here is far more dangerous than those that might come from afar. After all, an alien mind built here will know everything about us from the moment it arrives, having been designed to understand humans inside and out, optimized to sense our emotions and anticipate our actions, predict our feelings, influence our belief, and sway our opinions. If creatures speeding towards us in sleek silver spaceships had such deep knowledge of our behaviors and tendencies, we'd be terrified. Already, AI can defeat our best players at the hardest games on Earth. But really, these systems don't just master the games of chess, poker, and Go, they master the game of humans, learning to accurately forecast our actions and reactions, anticipating our mistakes and exploiting our weaknesses. Researchers around the world are already developing AI systems to outthink us, outnegotiate us, and outmaneuver us. Is there anything we can do to protect ourselves? We certainly can't stop AI from getting more powerful, as no innovation has ever been contained. And while some are working to put safeguards in place, we can't assume it will be enough to eliminate the threat. In fact, a poll by Pew Research indicates that few professionals believe the industry will implement meaningful ethical AI practices by 2030. So, how can we prepare for arrival? The best first step is to realize that AGI will happen in the coming decades, and it will not be a digital version of human intelligence. It will be an alien intelligence as foreign and dangerous as if it came from a distant planet. If we frame the problem this way, we might address it with urgency, pushing to regulate AI systems that monitor and manipulate the public, sensing our emotions and anticipating our behaviors. Such technologies may not seem like an existential threat today, as they're mostly being developed to optimize the effectiveness of AI-driven advertising, not to facilitate world domination, but that doesn't diminish the danger. AI technologies designed to analyze human sentiments and influence our beliefs can easily be used against us as weapons of mass persuasion. We should also be more cautious when automating human decisions. While it's undeniable that AI can assist in effective decision making, we should always keep humans in the loop. This means using AI to enhance human intelligence rather than working to replace it. Whether we prepare or not, alien minds are headed our way, and they could easily become our rivals, competing for the same niche at the top of the intellectual food chain. And while there's an earnest effort in the AI community to push for safe technologies, there's also a lack of urgency. That's because too many of us wrongly believe that a sentient AI created by humanity will somehow be a branch of the human tree, like a digital descendant that shares a very human core. This is wishful thinking. It's more likely that a true AGI will be profoundly different from us in almost every way. Yes, it will be remarkably skilled at pretending to be human. But beneath a people friendly facade, note facade, each one will be a rival mind that thinks and feels and acts like no creature we have ever met on Earth. The time to prepare is now. Wow. You know what? And I agree. And I'm, without being, and for any of those, yeah, one movie you've never seen it that kind of touches on this subject is a movie that came out, I want to say like 3 or 4 years ago called Ex Machina. Okay, EX, then Machina. Watch it. And basically, it plays into this exact thing where a human's vulnerabilities will be used against us by something that knows exactly what they are. And how can I say it? And because we want to believe that AI, because it's robotic, can't be manipulative, and that's this basically it's saying that that's not the case. And I would think that hopefully I agree with what he's saying about let robotics be an enhancement. And I'm going to give you an example. Let's go to Hollywood land. If anybody remembers Aliens Part 2, where Ripley, right at the very, in the first movie, first of all, the they had snuck well, no, I take that back. Everybody knew he was a robot. Their science officer was a robot. Okay. And of course, he looked human, and he was done purposely to look human so that everybody would feel comfortable around him. But he wasn't human. Just because he looked human wasn't human. And in the end, he turns out to be, for lack of a better word, the villain. He's being the one that's writing his instructions deep down. Besides, because he's helping them because basically he's a science officer and he's knows all this information. But really, who's giving him the orders is the corporation that built him. And in the whole movie is that at the end, this robot, okay, is being told all the humans on board are expendable. Just bring back this other life form back. All right. And In the second part, what I'm getting to, there's another part in the part two of the Aliens where Ripley's got this huge. She gets into like a robotic lifter. You can tell it's this thing that she works, and basically it looks like a forklift, but with arms. That's the kind of robotics I think we should be using, an enhancement. In other words, it's not sentient in the sense it's maneuvered and it's got buttons and it's got everything, but it's it's not alive, I guess is what I'm trying to say. As far it's there's you push the button and it turns off, and it enhances, let's say, a human strength to lift things, but that's the end of it. Whereas where the other kind of robotics, and I think part of it is our love of convenience and laziness, where something comes and anticipates what we want and how we want it, and we don't have to think, we don't have to bother. We can just go tra la la, let me enjoy life. And without being an alarmist, I think there's some truth to it. And even for the people that are like, oh, it'll be great, we'll have robots and life will be great and I don't have to break a sweat because the robot will take care of everything, clean up the house, mow the lawn, do my groceries, and I can just enjoy life. Remember, and I'm going to go back to Hollywoodland, iRobot. The premise of that, even though Asimov he tried to insert a lot of like, what time does robotics become sentient? He was kind of a pro-robot guy, which is ultimately robots are, how can I say, controlled by the corporation or whoever produces them. And if you remember that movie, they were going to download a certain program into these robots, which basically they were under the control. They became like the army of the corporation that was running it. And everybody could look at this movie and go, oh my God, is it? Doesn't everybody get downloads to their phones? And sometimes they say, oh, it's fixing a bug. But you really don't know sometimes what that download comes with when you download something. If you got an electric car, if you got any type of car, sometimes they'll download stuff into your car that could, I'm going to give you a perfect example. One of the last hurricanes 3 or 4 years ago in Florida, some people with electric cars found out that the manufacturers hit a little button and all of a sudden their electric cars were able to go a longer distance than they originally thought because there was a lot of people trying to flee the state. And unbeknownst to these car owners, hey, what do you mean my car can go another 100 miles? I didn't know that. Oh, well, we pushed a button and, we allowed it to go further. Okay, I'm going to get off my soapbox now. But for those of you who think, yeah, it's not paranoia, but yeah, something to think about if you're planning to be alive in a few years. Anyway, this one, this is out of New York Post. This is really, compost-mortem may be coming to a New York City funeral parlor near you. And you know that eventually this will go elsewhere. I don't think it's going to stop only at New York. Okay, New York State Assembly member Amy Pollin and State Senator Leroy Comrie have co-sponsored a bill to legalize human composting as part of measures the state is putting in place to eliminate carbon emissions by 2050. The bill is eligible to be taken up by the full Senate after it was voted out of committee Tuesday. Should the bill become law, Washington State Eco-Friendly Funeral Services Return Home, which offers human composting as a death care option and says it's gotten tons of inquiries from New Yorkers, may soon be able to make their last wishes come true. I'm passionate in favor of it, said Ned Baldwin, 51, who owns Houseman Restaurant on Greenwich Street in Soho. Baldwin says he plunked down $4,950 with Return Home to be composted at a much later date. The 60-day chemical-free process involves putting a person's remains in a vessel with organic materials such as straw, alfalfa, or sawdust. The box is sealed, attached to an HVAC system, and the remains allowed to decompose. At the 30-day mark, the contents are screened for inorganic material, and remaining bone is broken up and put back in. After another 30 days, the contents are returned to the family. The only two other legal options are to fill your body with chemicals and bury it, or use a tremendous amount of fossil fuels to burn it. He said, I don't think you have to be a terribly environmentally conscious person to think it's the right thing to do. In addition to Washington State, Colorado, and Oregon have legalized a process known as natural organic reduction. If four more states, Massachusetts, Illinois, California, and New York, legalize the process, it should take off as the world's first truly earth positive death care method, as burial and cremation options are environmentally unsustainable. Return Home CEO Micah Truman told the New York Post. To date, Return Home has serviced 50 families. Once a person's remains are composted, the company will deliver up to 400 pounds of soil, a mixture of organics and human remains, in a 3-to-1 ratio to the deceased family. Half of the families take all the soil, the rest just a portion, Truman noted. The CEO said one family planted a tree break in front of their home in Washington state, and a Hawaiian family plans to scatter the soil of their beloved 23-year-old daughter in their homeland. End-of-life planning involves deep personal decision, State Senator Comrie smiled, adding the law would grant New Yorkers the opportunity to choose natural organic reduction as one possibility in the regulated framework, and that he wants to advance the most thoughtful bill we can in this sensitive area. Comrie hopes the Senate and Assembly adopt the bill in this legislative session. Okay. Okay. The New York State Catholic Conference is not dying for the bill to pass. Composting and fertilizing may be appropriate for vegetable clippings or eggshells, but not for our mortal remains, said Dennis Paust, executive director of the New York State Catholic Conference, which represents Cardinal Timothy Dolan and the state's Catholic bishops in Albany. Funeral directors are aware of human composting, but not so eager to openly discuss it. Whatever the law allows, we would do, said one Staten Islander funeral director who has been in the business for 50 years and requested anonymity. Personally, I think it's horrific. Would I take my mother and do that to her? Never in a million years. I don't think that that's the respectful thing to do, but if it's legal, we, as funeral directors, have to do it. Hilton Flores, 65, a retired photojournalist from the island, said he plans to be cremated, but would seriously consider human composting if it becomes legal in New York. After you are gone, what's wrong with feeding nature, Flores says. I think it's a great idea. Count me in. Okay. I don't know. Like, what if this fertilizer shortage becomes, only kidding, becomes more serious? It's like, hey, we need some more composting here. Hurry up, hurry up. I don't know. It's a little bit morbid, and I'm thinking to myself, because most people don't realize, that you're allowed to bury people, at least in Florida. You could make, dig a hole and bury your loved one on your property, okay? And if we're talking here that you don't want, let's say you're thinking, okay, I want to be environmentally friendly. Don't embalm the person, okay? And bury them in a wooden coffin, like, when you see in the old westerns where, none of these, nice, just a wooden coffin, a wooden enclosure, no chemicals. And all it's going to cost you is just dig a hole and put them in there and bury it, and then put a nice garden over it, and there you go. You're composting. I mean, if that's the way you see it, whether it's because of the cost, because nowadays, a lot of these funeral, even cremation, can be up there, but this is not cheap either. Let Whether it's the cost or because you're thinking, yeah, why not? You could go that route, but I don't know. I just, it's a funny thing to be sending off somebody's remains and using it for compost. Nah, no. Let's go on to the next one. This is out of a Bloomberg Business. It's titled, "The World's First Flying Taxi Hub Takes Shape in the English Midlands." Coventry has seen better days. Once known as Britain's Motor City, the settlement of about 400,000 people in England's Midlands has been left struggling for an identity by decades of slumping auto output that followed widespread destruction from World War II bombing. This spring, however, Coventry is once again at the forefront of world-leading innovation in personal mobility as it hosts what's billed as the first ever fully functional hub for flying taxis, the electric-powered vertical takeoff and landing craft that backers are taking up as the biggest new thing in aviation. The site is fully functional, that is, apart from the air taxis themselves, with the scores of proposed eVTOL models yet to win regulatory sign-off. Unmanned drones are standing in for the typically 5-person craft during 3 weeks of demonstration flights in Coventry. Everything else, though, is just as it will be when the first flying cabs come into market in a few years' time, according to the hub's developer, Urban Airport Limited, a London-based startup that's leading the push to develop so-called vertiports in competition with UK rival Skyports Limited. We're here to show everyone what the future is going to look like, Urban Airport founder and executive chairman Ricky Sandhu said in an interview. There's no point having new technology if people don't believe in it. The hub, on a car parking lot at a busy junction across the road from Coventry's main railway station, makes no concession to the futuristic glamour of Jetson-style travel, while the city itself is emblematic of Britain's former industrial centers, seeking to reinvent itself yet increasingly held back by limited or overcrowded transport links. Coventry isn't London, and that's important, Sandhu said. London is well served by public transport. Coventry and many other cities are not. Surrounding the hub are charging points for electric cars and scooters intended to allow passengers to switch seamlessly from one mode of travel to another. The overall message is clear. Flying taxis aren't some exotic adventure, but a workaday solution to decarbonizing inner-city travel that will be within reach of many, costing much the same as an airport limousine. Hub construction will also be affordable, Sandhu says, starting at £5 at £5 million, equivalent to $6.1 million. The Coventry base is built to a donut-shaped design that Urban Airport reckons will be most efficient in city settings, featuring a central helicopter-style landing pad surrounded by an outer ring housing check-in facilities, a pre-departure lounge and cafe. The whole thing is only 150 feet across, partly to fit into crowded city centers, but also because the time between a passenger arriving and boarding a flight is intended to be just 20 minutes. That requires a minimal waiting area more comparable to a busy cab stand than an airport security queue. And there's no room for the rows of shops that cram most airport terminals. Instead, the hubs will feature a small number of high-end retailers, clothing brands. Anatomy and Paul & Shark, an Italian wine producer, Bottega Spa are now on the show in Coventry, plus advertising screens promoting online purchases. When their flights are ready, passengers simply walk a few meters to the waiting craft, visible through ceiling-high glass walls at the center of the vertiport. Once they've boarded, the patio elevates until it's level with the top of the building, allowing the eVTOL to rise into the air and head off to its destination. Airlines have placed orders for hundreds of the battery-powered craft, which have been exhibited at air shows. While they're mostly intended for short journeys, some can fly more than 100 miles. Urban Airport aims to build 200 hubs over the next 5 years and is offering 5 different designs. The Air One passenger base on show in Coventry, a floating Marine One version, Resilience One, which can be quickly assembled to provide disaster relief, City Box for cargo carriage, and Docks Box, designed to attach to loading bays at warehouses and logistics centers. The firm says it's engaged in 65 active programs around the world with real estate developers, city authorities, airports, business hubs, science parks, tourism ventures, and government planners. It holds letters of intent and pre-orders for 13 vertiports worth about £60 million. The company also has reserves for development as equity fundraising approaches £20 million from investors including South Korea's Hyundai, the world's 4th largest car maker and developer of the Supersnell SA-1 eVTOL, a full-scale model of which is on display in Coventry. The project is also backed by the city's council and government-funded UK research and innovation. Britain is not only a world leader in eVTOL hubs, but a major player in developing the craft, with Bristol, England-based Vertical Aerospace Limited leading a crowded global field with more than 1,300 provisional orders won. Virgin Atlantic Airways Limited, which has signed for 150 of Vertical's VX4 craft, says the UK's compact geography and large number of major towns and cities combined with crowded roads make it an ideal test bed for the new technology. In addition to gaining public acceptance, something the Coventry experiment is designed to help address, flying taxis must win certification from aviation regulators. That could prove challenging given how different eVTOLs are from earlier craft. Integrating air taxis into aviation networks present another hurdle. They could initially operate under visual flight rules, as helicopters do now, and navigate using physical landmarks, but scenarios involving hundreds of craft touching down in locations across a city would require far more complex control systems. More than 10,000 ticket-only visitors have so far explored the Coventry hub since it's opened on April 25th, with thousands more craning their neck to watch the double bed-sized Malloy Aeronautics T-150 drone climb above the sky. Under special dispensation from the UK Civil Aviation Authority, it's the first time an unmanned craft of its size has ever flown in such a built up environment. Sandu says feedback has been overwhelmingly positive. Industry visitors have included representatives from Vertical Aerospace and its German rivals Lilium GmbH and Volocopter GmbH, Airbus SEM Boeing's company's eVTOL joint venture Whisk, as well as discount airline EasyJet plc, Munich Airport and aerospace manufacturers BAE System plc and Leonardo SPA or SPA. The public response has been tremendous, with people generally enthused by the project and even some skeptics won over, says Sandu, citing a man employed in the local auto industry who attended with his son. He was initially very negative, Sandu says, but after half an hour of looking around and watching a flight, he'd completely changed his mind. He came in a naysayer and left a convert. These are people we need to convince. I don't know. I'm going to withhold judgment on that for a while. Okay, like they said, there's, yeah. I'll just let's see what happens. Obviously, there's enough people interested in it as in big companies that they're going to take it in that direction one way or the other. All right, this is out of Vice, and it's titled "Scientist Grows Plant in Moon Soil for First Time in Major Breakthrough." Before we get started, what's this thing with the moon now? We were ignoring the moon. We went to the moon, back forth, whatever, in the 60s, 70s, and then it stopped. End of story. Now all of a sudden, they're sending human DNA to be stored on the moon. Now they're using the moon soil to grow stuff. What's up with the moon? The truth will out sooner or later, but anyway. Plants grown in soil from 3 Apollo landing sites paved the way to sustainable lunar habits. In a major breakthrough, scientists have grown plants in moon dirt, marking the first time that seeds have ever been sown in soils from an extraterrestrial body, reports a new study. The milestones paves the way towards lunar gardens that might support future human crews on the moon, though it's important to note that the plants in the experiment, which were grown in 3 different soils, returned by the Apollo 11, 12, and 17 missions, experienced stress and stunted growth compared to their counterparts planted in Earth-based materials. For decades, people have speculated about the possibility of growing plants in extraterrestrial regolith, which is a loose material found on the moon and other rocky bodies, because this achievement would serve as a clear stepping stone towards a more sustainable human presence on the lunar surface and beyond. Now it's been achieved, according to a study published on Thursday in the journal Communications Biology. Plants will grow in lunar regolith, said Robert Furl, a distinguished professor of horticultural sciences in the University of Florida's Institute of Food and Agricultural Sciences, and senior author of the study, in an email. Surprising? Maybe. Astounding? For sure. Terrestrial life can potentially live on the moon, and for astronauts spending any time on the moon, plants can be used for life support in ways that have till now only been speculated upon. Furl and two of his colleagues at the University of Florida, Annalisa Paul and Stephen Ilardo, announced in the study that the terrestrial plant Arabidopsis thaliana, commonly known as theocress, germinates and grows in diverse lunar regoliths, though they did not grow as well as plants seeded in a fake lunar soil called JSC lunar simulant. While plants survived being dusted and rubbed with lunar samples in experiments that took place 50 years ago, hinting at their possible viability in moon soils, Furl noted that there was no real way to set expectations about the outcome of his team's experiment with actually directly planting them in lunar soils for the first time. All we could do was our best process and then watch, he said. Furl and his colleagues were able to finally pull this notion of moon plants from the land of speculation into reality thanks to their decade-long effort to obtain Apollo moon samples from NASA's Johnson Space Center Lunar Receiving Laboratory. Though there have been many studies about plant growth in fake extraterrestrial soils called simulants, procuring the real stuff is understandably a difficult task, and one with permanent consequences in this case. The samples are precious, and it makes good sense for NASA to be very careful about lending them out for any purpose, Furl noted. In addition, once these samples see some biology, they can never ever be the same as they were on the moon. The lunar samples can now never be used to study them as they existed on the moon, so NASA had to take a deep breath in considering giving out samples that can essentially not be used for any other purpose. However, Furl added that the Artemis program, a new plan to return humans to the moon spearheaded by NASA, has changed the calculus for the agency. Whereas the Apollo astronauts spent at most a few days on the lunar surface, NASA and its Artemis partner hope to eventually send crews to live on the moon for weeks or even months. This ambitious goal depends on greenlighting experiments like the one conducted at UF to better inform strategies for living off the lunar land. Plus, NASA expects Artemis crews to return new moon rocks to Earth, which should also relieve some of the demand for the existing samples from the Apollo era. That said, Furl said his colleagues did not exactly receive full planners of lunar dirt for their experiment. NASA gave them just 12 grams total, split between the sites explored by the Apollo 11, 12, and 17 crews. To work with a small quantity, the team devised a miniature garden that sounds like something out of an otherworldly fairy tale, in which the plants were seeded in thimble-sized pots of moon dust collected by interplanetary explorers who captured the world's imagination a half-century ago. To that end, the incredible history and value of these regolith samples were not lost on Furl and his colleagues. Just imagine holding the moon in the palm of your hand, Furl said. We have practiced extensively the procedures that we employed to handle the lunar samples. Over and over again, we practiced with the JSC lunar simulant. We knew what we were doing. But opening up these samples, seeing handling being responsible for actual lunar samples, we were literally shaking. He continued, I am surprised that we did not just spill it all, and so glad that we did not. So yeah, holding samples collected by Armstrong, Aldrin, Conrad, Bean, Cernan, and Schmidt while they were on the moon is an experience forever remembered and valued. Arabidopsis thaliana, which is now the first bona fide lunar seedling, was selected for the experiment for a multitude of reasons. It is a model organism with a genome that's extremely well understood, enabling the researchers to monitor nuanced variation in its genetic expressions. It is also small enough to fit into the tiny plant boxes in the study. Plus, Furl noted that the plant has a rich history of spaceflight, having been in numerous experiments on the Space Shuttle and the International Space Station. While all of the plants germinated in the lunar samples, some of the Apollo sites proved to be apparently better suited for gardening than others, a difference revealed by the team's monitoring of the seedlings' genetic expressions. The plants sown in the Apollo 11 regolith, which was returned by Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin during the first landing in the moon's Sea of Tranquility, fared the worst, as they activated 465 different genes compared to the simulant control. The plant's growth in regolith, collected in the Taurus Littrow Lunar Valley by Apollo 17, Gene Cernan and Harrison Schmitt, the last humans to walk on the moon, were the least stressed, expressing only 113 genes at different levels. Meanwhile, the plants grown in the Apollo 12 regolith, collected by Charles P. Conrad and Alan Bean from the moon's oceans of storms, expressed 265 different genes. Furl and his colleagues think the difference in growth here were caused in part by the varying exposures of the regolith samples to cosmic winds. Apollo 11's landing site receives more of this weathering exposure than its counterparts, producing more abrasive materials that are not as conducive to plant growth. Even so, none of these basaltic lunar soils produce plants as healthy as those needed in the simulant, suggesting that moon gardens may require very special green thumbs. A major takeaway is that lunar plant growth is very possible, yet we have to understand the challenges in order to maximize plant growth. Furl said, there's work to be done, but success is seeable and reachable. The level of stresses that we see are similar to marginal agricultural lands here on Earth, and we have yet to work on mitigation strategies, adding that the more we learn about the responsive plants, the better informed those strategies will be. As scientists, the coming Artemis missions mark an important transition in the space and lunar exploration realm. The transition to a sustained presence on the moon, he concluded. This will take science to enable that extended stay, and that extended stay means more science infrastructure on the moon. So one major milestone would be having the kind of infrastructure on the moon like a lunar laboratory where scientists would live and work. Very interesting, but again, why has the moon become, after so many years? They're saying the last, what was it? The 17 was the last one on there. Let me see something. Yeah, Apollo 17. Let's take a look, just because sometimes, what is, okay. All right, Apollo 17. This is from It went up to the moon December 7th through the 19th of 1972. 1972. 82, 92, 2000. What, 50 years later, all of a sudden, it's like, hey, the moon, it's there. Yeah. Okay, let's go back to this. I think is an interesting post out of New York Post titled Rescue Dog Gets New Mission with Elite Bomb Squad. Budapest, Hungary. Hungary's military has found a new mission in life for a talented dog who was rescued from abusive owners, recruiting 2-year-old Logan to serve in counter-terrorism operations for an elite bomb squad. The Belgian Shepherd is undergoing intensive training as an explosives detection dog for the Explosive Ordnance Disposal and Warship Regiment of the Hungarian Defense Forces. At the unit's garrison on the Danube River in the capital Budapest, Logan receives daily socialization and obedience exercise and is trained to recognize the smell of 25 different explosive substances. He has already started to learn how to smell explosives in a completely homogeneous environment, and he has also started to learn how to search motor vehicles and ships, said Logan's trainer, Sergeant First Class Balázs Nemeth. Logan's new role as a bomb sniffer came only after an early life full of hardships. In 2021, animal welfare officers received a tip that a dog was being abused and held in inhumane conditions at a rural residence in northeastern Hungary. During an on-site inspection, the officers found Logan confined to a 3-foot chain and suffering from malnourishment. Several weeks later, Nemeth, the regiment's training officer, visited the shelter where Logan was housed and began assessing his suitability for becoming a professional bomb sniffer. The moment we met, the first impressions were very positive. We saw a well-motivated dog in relatively good condition. We immediately had confidence in him, Nemeth said. In a demonstration at the unit's garrison, Nemeth opened a case containing 24 vials of mock explosive material like C4, TNT, ammonium nitrate, and others which Logan is trained to detect. After concealing a small package of explosives in a hidden crevice on one of the regiment's riverboats, Nemeth brought Logan to the training area where he went immediately to work, sniffing for the package, which he found within seconds. The dog's body tensed as he pointed with his nose at the source of the smell, alerting his handler. The regiment's commanding officer, Colonel Zsolt Szilágyi, said that the increased use of improvised explosive devices by extremist cells since the turn of the millennium have made it necessary to employ new methods for detecting potential bombs. This was a challenge to which the military had to respond, and one of the best ways to detect these devices is to use explosive detection dogs, Szilágyi said. These 4-legged comrades have been supporting the activities of our bomb disposal soldiers. Logan, he said, will serve as an inspector of important sites in Hungary and could be sent along with the country's military to NATO missions abroad. While rescued dogs often present challenges in training, given their often traumatic backgrounds, Nemeth said he is confident that Logan will be successful and make a valuable addition to the unit. Logan is very valuable because about 1 out of 10,000 rescue dogs is fit for military service, both medically and psychologically, he said. Recruiting rescue dogs often reveals their undiscovered capabilities and allows for them to find a new home where they can thrive. There are dogs that have great potential, but for some reason they have been pushed to the margins. He said, we can give these dogs a new opportunity to be placed in a family, so to speak, where they can live a proper life in loving, competent hands and be useful. Amen to that. All right, here we are, back at the end. And I will be back with you guys very soon, okay, with more interesting news, all right, as to this crazy world that we live in. But isn't it interesting? Otherwise, it'd be very boring. So until then, take care. See you soon.